Hey, it's Travis again. I'm doing another quick code video. These quick, hopefully, videos are aimed at adult learners like myself or adolescent learners who are maybe struggling with some of the basic syntax in Python programming. I started Python a couple months ago. It's not my first foray into programming. I started it when I was like 18. I got through HTML. I struggled with Java. I kind of quit for a long time. And in the last year, I've really dedicated myself to trying to learn it because I want to build apps for teachers like me that help make using data in my job easier. So last year, I bounced really hard off C Sharp. This year, since January, I've looked at a couple different languages and I've been building my own proficiency. And the point of these quick code videos is to help you build your proficiency too. So if you like that kind of thing, subscribe and do whatever the doodads are. But I want to get right into this because I try to keep these at 8 minutes or less. So I'm going to talk in this quick video, hopefully quick, about variables. I've seen not often but periodically some confusion about what the heck a variable is, and I know that when I was a learner I was locked into the idea that a variable was like the algebraic x, and it really threw me off that I could just put anything into these variables. And it wasn't until I started writing in Python that I started to get the idea that, like, no, a variable is like a container for a value. I'm not saying that when I declare a variable, like if I declare x equals 5, that's not forever and ever. The program is just right now the value of x is 5. That was a barrier that I had to break through because I was so used to the algebraic mathematical way of thinking about variables. And obviously in math you could change the value of a variable with something like, a subsequent expression, but in programming and in Python, x can very quickly become a string. Now, look, it's not throwing any errors. So I went from a numerical value, 5, over to a string value, which technically has a numerical value of 0, but it does a very different thing in the program. So the big idea here is that a variable is a container that has a name and a value in Python. It technically has a type as well, but in Python that's mostly inferred or dynamically interpreted, so the user doesn't, or rather the programmer doesn't have to really think about it a whole lot unless you're optimizing or you're typecasting, or the method that you want to use, which we'll look at this in a second, doesn't work very well with the type of variable you're using. So sometimes you do need to explicitly say, hey, it's going to become this type of variable. And I will show you how to do that because it's really important, especially if you're using user input. So variables can have many different types. I'll show you a couple of them down here, down below, and then I'll show you how to typecast. So we have a couple of key kinds, but there are many different types, and I'd recommend that you look up different variable types and their uses and their memory sizes on the Python docs or on something like We3 Schools, or I think it's called Geeks for Geeks, where there are great explanations of what different variable types are. But the first and one of the most common is your integer variable. So this is any whole number, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, up to whatever the memory limit is, or down to whatever the memory limit is on an integer. I don't know them offhand. I don't think you need to know them offhand, but if you're doing something tricky where you've got very little memory, different types of variables can allow you to express integers with more or less memory. So to declare an integer variable, all I do is x equals 5. I could do c equals 92. I could do, I don't know, New York City equals 0. I don't know, whatever, something like that. Each of these variables, the variable name is now tied in memory to the value that I have assigned it with this equals. And this is another thing that really threw me off when I was learning to code originally, is equals in math is like saying, okay, these things are equal, right? Well, if you look at the if-then video, or you look at the match case video, or even the for loop and the while loop videos, I run into issues even still where I forget that equals is an assignment operator in Python, but it can't be used as an evaluation, saying like these two things are equal. I am just assigning the value of 5 to the variable x. That's it. I'm not saying that they're equal. I am merely saying 5 is the variable that goes into the variable x. 5 is the value that goes into the variable x. So that's kind of important, especially if you're working with integers. You want to know what the value is of that particular variable. Another type of variable that's extremely common is the string variable. So a string variable and a char variable, I think, are both expressed with double quotes, and it could be any combination of letters. We could do X, we could do Twitter, because those are two things that are, whatever. We could do NASA in all uppercase, we could do NASA in all lowercase, we could do doobly doobly, doopity doo, whatever, something like that I would say to one of my daughters when we're goofing around, right? Whatever that string contains is now tied in memory to the variable X. That's a string. Note that you can't do something like this. I don't think. It's not throwing errors at me. That's weird. I don't know what's happening. See, look, I'm a learner too. But a float variable is something like this, 5.5, right? Notice that if I leave it like this, it should be, it's not going to throw an error at me. That's interesting. A float is a floating point number, so it's got a decimal in there. Could be like this, could be like this, whatever. There are memory limits, again, just like with the integers, up and down for how many decimal points you can use, and that's where looking at the Python docs or something like We3 Schools will be really helpful. In each of these cases, I have dynamically reassigned the value of X, and let me show you what I mean. I'm going to print the value of X to my console. Oh, you know what? Let's delete this so that it's a little bit more obvious what I'm doing. Okay. So, even though I declared X as 5, I overrode it with oobly doopity doo, a string, and then I overrode it again with this new value, and that's the last value that was assigned to it. And look, there it is. So you do need to be careful if you're using the same type or the same variable name that you don't override it before it does the thing you need it to do. Conversely, I can say print X, get out of my face, and we will copy and paste this here, and now I will get each of those values. 5, did I not do it under oobly doobly? No, I didn't. Okay. Let's try it one last time. There it is, 5 oobly doopity doo, and then 5001 whatever, right? Because I'm saying print the value of X. Well, when this print command shows up, that's the current value of X, right? Python, unlike many other languages, can do the dynamic reassignment. Something like C#, I would probably have to say that this is a double, right? Which Python doesn't recognize. It's going to confuse it. So in some languages, they are statically or strongly typed, which means you have to declare what the variable type is before you initialize it and give it a value. That way, the compiler or however it's reading through your code to execute it knows how much memory to allocate to that variable. Python does it dynamically, which has its pros and cons. The pro is it's very flexible. You can do many different things with it. You can do dynamic reassignment. The con is that my understanding is it slows down the execution and it makes it allocate more memory than it otherwise would. That's something you'd fact check me on though, because I'm a learner too. So the last thing that I want to show is how can I typecast a variable type so I can use it. This is something that it took me a little bit to get my head around, but let's do user input is my variable name, and I'm going to do input, give me a number, and then I'm going to do print user input plus 5. So let's run this program, and I know I'm getting to my 10-minute mark. It's inevitable, I think. Give me a number. So I'm going to put in the number 6. What do you think will happen? Is it going to give me 11? Is it going to give me 6, 5? Is it going to give me something else? Well, it's not going to do anything because it can't concatenate a string. Or I'm sorry, it can't concatenate a integer to a string, right? concatenation means we're kind of boxcarring them together like a train. We're stitching together a string. Well, Python can't do that between two different variable types, particularly with strings and non-strings. So what I can do, because I want to do something like this, is I could go and put this and turn that into a string. That is no longer the value 5. It is just the alphanumeric character of 5. I'll do it again, like SpongeBob says, right? Want to see me do it again? What do I get? Now I get 65, because I've concatenated the 6 and the 5. And you might be thinking, well, hold on a second. You typed in 6, so why is it giving you two strings, a 6 and a 5 string, and putting them together? That is because Python takes in anything that you do through an input method on its own with no other alterations. It treats all inputs as strings. That's something you've got to get your head around when you're using user input. The solution to this is to typecast. So I can say, give me an int, and what I've done is I still have my input method, but I've wrapped around it the int type. And now I'm saying, whatever this is, I want you to try to convert it to an integer. And now I'm going to get rid of this, because otherwise I'll get the same concatenation error. Now, if I run this and I input 6 again, if I input 6, what's happening is it's taking in the 6 string, it's converting it to an integer, and then it's adding 5. So what would happen? I get 11, right? And then the program ends. That is critical to being able to properly use user input, especially if you're doing anything like calculation with what the user puts in. That's why you have to wrap the integer around it. Is it a little bit clunky? Well, it's easier to do that in Python than it is in C#. There are a couple different ways of doing it in C#. None of them are that easy. So it's something to keep in mind, that you can typecast or change the types between them. We could even do this as a float. I could do it as a short, I think. Long? No, I don't remember my variable names offhand. I think I just fell into the C# versions. So that's it. I ran at 12 minutes. Gosh. All right, so I'm going to end the video there, but that is why sometimes you'll see that int or float or double running right over it. Just as a thought experiment, what would happen if you were to concatenate two different strings from inputs together? Something to go try. If you found this helpful, consider subscribing or sharing it with other learners, because the whole point is to help learners like myself pick up the basics of programming so we can have fun building stuff. So that's it. I will see you later.